So this is the Sunday Times magazine giving Boris Johnson completely unwarranted kind of plug. And this is based on alleged kind of environmental friendly outlook of Kerry Simmons. And it claims that the Kerry Simmons and friends are rewilding the Tories. Well, that is a very trendy claim, but it's not anywhere near substantially true. So it says climate emergency, Greenpeace, and whaling, Fridays for Future. These are some of the banners. And the CND, of course. Now, this is the front page peddling by the Sunday Times magazine. And we have, our movement has got long record of engagement against the Sunday Times magazine. We created the campaign against the Sunday Times magazine, mounting an attack on the Bangladeshis, on the Silotis, on the Muslims. Remember the key groups in East London, and especially in and around Brick Lane, London, East London. Now that was something that the Sunday Times color supplement, as it was called, and we called it. That was before, let's see, when Kerry Simmons was born. So Kerry Simmons her entry has been changed from Kerry Simmons to Kerry Johnson, of course. And it shows that she was born on the 17th of March, 1988. So our campaign against the Sunday Times was, of course, 15 years before Kerry Simmons was even born. And how long ago was it? How long before Johnson was he already born, or was he about to be born? So he was born already. So that was 19th of June, 1964, it says here. So 6, 7, 8, 9. So Johnson was himself between 8 and 9 years when we started the campaign against the Sunday Times magazine, publishing the attack on the Bangladeshis, the Muslims, the Silotis in East London and in the UK and internationally. And so the Sunday Times is not something on the evidence, direct evidence that we have had to deal with, can be reliable on the facts. And so therefore, this piece is to be treated as a decoration, as a propaganda for Johnson. And we shall talk more about the problems that the conservatives are continuing to create against the environment. And the conservatives are the ones that are currently leading and have always been leading the assault on the environment. And as we said, the political murder by Keir Starmer of the Labour Party in Britain means that the 100 billion plus current course, the 100 billion plus abuse of money and the trillions of pounds worth of destruction to the English environment under the pretext of this HS2. I mean, it's incalculable damage. And no amount of propaganda, this kind of propaganda, this is like an infantile propaganda by the Sunday Times magazine. No amount of this kind of propaganda is going to stop the destruction of the planet, destruction of England and the UK, the destruction of Wales, destruction of Cornwall, destruction of Scotland, destruction of Northern Ireland and the areas around the British Isles by the Tories. And it's not just that. The Tories have also been doing the third runway at Heathrow, which is the equivalent in terms of the number of years and the amount of damage, equivalent to destroying a whole chunk of the planet itself. And there is no evidence that there is no evidence whatsoever that the UK government, so-called, fronted by Boris Johnson, is going to stop the destruction of the planet to the extent that his policies relate to and cause an impact. Now, the fact that the G7 is taking place is, of course, incidentally demonstrable as a relevant topical kind of peg by the Sunday Times to the events in its promotional kind of calculation for the timing of this particular cover of the Sunday Times magazine. That may be the case, but the summit, which began formally on Friday, has not so far been reported by Fleet Street or any of the other so-called mainstream media as having understood, recognized, taken any action, let alone taken any action about the climate change and the horrible and horrific consequences against the planet that are being caused every day. And this edition of the Sunday Times is absolutely typical of the Fleet Street lying, because there is no mention in the front page kind of pieces of the happening that is the G7 that's happening in Cornwall. In fact, anything but the G7 and anything but the actual impact that UK government policy and the policies of the other G7 quote members are continuing to have on the planet. And there are pieces on the Sunday Times, page 2. They are brazenly promoting Kerry Simmons as a campaigner. I mean, there is no evidence that she is a campaigner, except that she is a paraded image of a campaigner. So they're showing that on the magazine, this week in the Sunday Times, they're featuring her as carry on campaigning. The Prime Minister's wife and the eco clique that's turning the Tories green. And she's being showing Japan Stop Whaling. Now, Japan Stop Whaling is not being registered at the G7 proceedings about the behavior of the Japanese in massacring the whales. And there is a piece on page 5 of the Sunday Times, which is giving a rare admission by the chief of the World Health Organization, who's saying, according to that heading, that the World Health Organization can't rule out the leak of the COVID virus from a laboratory in China. So and there is a piece which should be headed that Robert Jenrick, who is the so-called housing minister, is continuing to be involved in corruption. And it says housing tycoon gave £150,000 to Tories days after minister backed rural scheme. That means that literally billions of pounds worth of destruction of the countryside and of society's resources are going to be caused by the policies that Jenrick gave the go-ahead to and introduced days after a conservative who is part of the pushers of the agenda for destroying the countryside and the environment gave a pathetic sum of £150,000 to the Conservatives. I say pathetic because compared to the billions that he and the others are going to make by destroying the countryside, destroying the environment, £150,000 is nothing. So the Conservative Party, fronted by Boris Johnson, is openly a bribed operation. It's not a democratic government. And they are doing a thing on the word pandemic. On page 10, pupil 15 is the latest to die in pandemic of violence. And the boy who was murdered in West London is quoted as saying, amongst other things, we have a pandemic of violence that is not being treated like a pandemic, said John Jackson, a physics teacher. Well, this is not the father of a physics teacher and pastor in Wolverhampton who rushed from his work to comfort the boy's father, Jairzinho Bell, in London. And it's the same person, the pastor, John Jackson, also said as long as it stays in inner cities and urban areas, then it is not being seen as a problem that needs to be tackled. There is a feeling the victims are not actually being seen as victims, but have done something to deserve it. Unless we do something, there are many innocent people being caught up in it, and their stories aren't being told. The Metropolitan Police in London said that officers were called to reports of a fight on Blythe Road, close to Hayes and Harlington Station, where they found Jalan injured. London Ambulance Service and the air ambulance attended, but the teenager died at the scene. A post-mortem examination is due to take place today. Describing the schoolboy as your typical teenager, Jackson said that Jalan's family, who are thought to be of Latin American origin, were still processing the tragedy. It is terrible for everyone, he said. I have a 17-year-old son myself, so it has really hit me, especially that he, Jalan, was on his way to school and so on. But the point we make about this report is world exclusively original, and we shall come to that detailed comment later in this edition. And the campaign to end the lockdown by the right wing, the campaign by the Sun, the Daily Mail, and the others, and this report on page 2 is the biggest report on the world news page, 2-page spread, pages 16 and 17. It's against the asylum seekers and the people who are allegedly crossing the channel to reach England. And this 2-page spread, 16 and 17, headlined, "Don't worry if you can't swim. The English will pick you up." Now, that is an emotional, absolutely emotional racist slogan. And this will get this kind of headline is worse than the normal tabloid racist headline. The Sunday Times is not a tabloid size, it is broadsheet size still. But it's using tabloid hateful kind of heading. And the kind of people that would be absolutely aroused in the hatred of asylum seeker are among the most unthinking, thoughtless, ignorant, ill-informed people. We call them the gullibles. And there is absolutely nothing about the G7 itself. There are tidbits like this one in the Atticus column, byline to Gabriel Pogrand. He's talking about Justin Trudeau of Canada, saying that Trudeau flip-flops into a new fashion crime. And the only item about the G7 is by India Knight. It's a column in the comment section of page 20, which says, "High times at Bojo's Boho Beach Bonanza. Buttered rum and shanties look eccentric, but why can't the suits have fun? It's got to take your mind off sausages wars and climate change." And India Knight is not known as a campaigner. India Knight is the privileged daughter of a privileged Fleet Street executive, Andrew Knight, and she is not part of the many. And there is a celebration of the racist vote-winning plot by Boris Johnson and the Conservatives at the next election. And it is introduced in this way in the news review of the Sunday Times. And it says how the Tories weaponized woke. What they're saying is that the Tories are capitalizing on being racist. And what I just said in the last section, the gullibles. The Tories are preparing to even further brainwash the gullibles to get the gullibles to vote for the Conservatives. So that's the Sunday Times. And the picture here picture on the top there is this person. Tim Shipman reports about Dougie Smith. It says ministers are wading into debates over trans rights, taking the knee and cricketers' tweets. It is all part of a vote-winning plot masterminded by Douglas Smith or Dougie Smith, the most powerful man in politics you have never heard of. And this looks like a picture of Dougie Smith with Munira Mirza. And that is what it looked like, and it is Munira Mirza. And the Munira Mirza is the one that is working with Douglas Smith for racists, because she tried earlier with Tony Sewer's report, so-called commission report, denying the existence of institutional racism in Britain. So now they're having another go. And what this points out is that neither over Munira Mirza's exploitation and employment of Tony Sewers for racists, nor in the latest attempt to capitalize on racism as a vote-winning strategy and plot, has there been any evidence of any response or awareness about these by the Labour Party that used to be. The Labour Party has been, as we have said on the evidence, politically murdered by Keir Starmer. So therefore there has been no comment about any of the latest racist ploys by the Conservatives, electoral ploys. There has been no comment, there has been no commentary, there is no evidence of any agenda setting preparation by the Labour Party, so-called. So what they're saying is that racists who deny Black Lives Matter and taking the knee are getting votes from the ordinary people, like including the people in Batley and Span, where the by-election is about to happen. And the Conservatives are saying in this piece that on the doorstep the voters don't care about the taking the knee or the Black Lives Matter. Now you would think, logically, you would think, rationally, you would think that that's the kind of issue about which the Labour Party should be leading. Leading not just the commentary, the opinion, but leading the direction, political direction of the country by evidence. There is no evidence that the Labour Party exists in that. And we shall be going back to this is the only comment about the G7 is actually mentioned in any headline or heading. This is a heading by somebody called Robert Colville. And his piece has got the heading, Freewheeling Boris Johnson will spoil his G7 afterglow unless he shows Brexit Britain can be trusted. And this is a comment based on the opinions as expressed by Joe Biden and the EU about Johnson, about Northern Ireland. And this Colville piece is saying in the last part or paragraph, there is unlikely to be a stand-up row on this subject of Brexit at this weekend summit, not least because the Prime Minister, that is Johnson, will be keen not to poop his own party, but he urgently needs to find a way to resolve the situation without disappointing either his supporters at home or his allies abroad. Because if too many other countries end up concluding that they can't trust us, that is UK, global Britain may start to look less like the cool new kid on the international dance floor and more like the oldest swinger in town. This analogy is completely obscene. So it's a kind of timid, hesitant, and opportunistic piece by this writer, Robert Colville. Doesn't want to tell the truth, and he can't avoid the truth either. And here is a boastful racist thug boasting about this: I eat meat, use petrol, and say the wrong thing. My days in gainful employment must be numbered. Now here is the liar, racist liar that the BBC paid millions to, while keeping him in post to cause damage to the environment. Racing cars. And the BBC paid the millions from the taxpayers. Well, the people who are forced to pay the license fee. And when he says that his days in gainful employment are numbered, he obviously is being sarcastic and offensive, intentionally bragging, because as he is a millionaire, multimillionaire, even if he loses a particular spot as a gainful employment, he won't be struggling to house himself, struggling to feed himself, and so on. And there is nothing in Fleet Street today that is any different from what Fleet Street has been publishing for centuries. Fleet Street is not about ordinary people. That's the whole point. The media in Britain, Fleet Street, is not about ordinary people. It's about telling lies to the ordinary people, brainwashing them, exploiting them. And there is no platform, there is no stage, there is no way, there is no remedy, there is no respite from these lying and lies. And who are these people? These people are paid more than the average member of the many in society ever will get. And the same thing is the case with the Guardian, the Daily Mirror, the Sunday Mirror, the Sunday People. And there are two books that are reviewed in the culture supplement of the Sunday Times. One is by The Politics, reviewed by David Goodhart. And the books are by Gordon Brown and Ed Miliband. And the title of the Miliband one is How to Fix Our World by Ed Miliband, Bodley Head, 18.99, and it's 352 pages. And 7 Ways to Change the World is How to Fix the Most Pressing Problems We Face by Gordon Brown. It's published by Simon & Schuster, 25 pounds, and it's 512 pages. And this is a review by David Goodhart, which accuses both Miliband and Brown of timidity. But this Goodhart himself is timid. And he says he is a former Labour member and voted for both Miliband and Brown. It is hard to disagree with much of what they say, but neither has grasped the deeper reasons for the failure of the modern left, essentially that it has become a vehicle for the interests of liberal graduate class, nor their own contribution to the failure. The Brown admits that his Britishness debate was seen as vague generalities. Both men have stood still intellectually for 30 years. Brown is still reclining the argument of Clinton's Labour Secretary Robert Reich from his book The Work of Nations, that rich countries should roll with globalization and find good new jobs for the losers. What has changed are their conservative opponents, about whom they both show zero curiosity. Yet Theresa May wanted workers on boards of, and Miliband's chapter on regional inequality could have been written by Neil O'Brien, MP, the Tories' new levelling up czar. Neither book is an easy read. Miliband is charmingly self-deprecating, but writes as if addressing a bright teenager. Brown's is a classic work of the very concerned former leader variety, with too much detail and not enough analytical meat. Now we are doing the analytical meat every day, and we're doing it world exclusively. And we have said that the Labour Party actually began the process of decay and degeneration shortly after the only electoral kind of victory that had all kinds of factors, including the fact that it was immediately after the end of the so-called Second World War. We have said on the evidence that the Labour Party ceased to exist after that. Think about that. We are saying a very big thing. And David Goodhart will never acknowledge what we are saying, nor will anybody else in Fleet Street. But that is what is the case. And we shall talk more about that. Death of the Labour Party, political death, political murder of the Labour Party by the current so-called leader. Keir Starmer. This is the Rupert Murdoch's Come on Sunday. And again, they're looking for any pretext, any excuse not to talk about Boris Johnson's failure at the G7 summit, which is going on currently this weekend. And they have nothing about the G7. And they're parading this person, this sports person, Ericsson, as if he's done something to save humanity or something like that, or he's equivalent of the Catholic Pope. And we're still looking, they've got nothing about the G7. And even the fact that the Brenda, Queen Elizabeth II, was at the G7 summit meeting the attendees. They're not talking about her doing that. They're talking about her dog. And the only thing they're doing about the G7 summit is a big picture, group picture of the leaders and their spouses. And they're having a go at France's president, Emmanuel Macron. But that is part of the agenda of Brexit. It's not the agenda of the world, G7. And this is the kind of brazen stupidity by the Murdoch media that keeps the gullibles in a state of eternal, endless stupidity and ignorance and misinformation. And what they're doing with the editorial is they're praising Carrie Simmons. And there is a dedicated piece of hostility against China. It's not about G7 and poverty and helping the world. Not at all. And this criminal, Tony Parsons, he says this sports person's injury is what is important, not opposing racism, not advocating the rights of the victims of racism, and not talking about Black Lives Matter. Now, we have said on the evidence, and we shall continue to say on the evidence, that Black Lives Matter is full of imperfections, mistakes and errors and prejudice and so on. But it doesn't have to be Black Lives Matter. What does have to be recognized and practiced is awareness of racism day to day and the need for action against racism day to day, not just on the football pitches, but elsewhere in society, everywhere. And as we have said earlier, the Mail on Sunday has devoted the main space on the front page to an attack on Meghan and Harry. And this is a brazen denial of the G7 by Fleet Street. And they are saying that the Brenda will the Queen Elizabeth II, they're saying that she is not going to allow the Los Angeles-based spin machine to carry on spinning mistruths about the royal family. The naming of the baby girl that Meghan has given birth to, the naming of this girl after Brenda, Lilibet, and Diana, Mountbatten, Windsor. This is an absolutely fine, excellent, and elegant choice. What is there to criticize? And yet, the Mail on Sunday and the Mail group are leading the charge against Meghan and Harry, including falsely claiming, untruthfully claiming that Harry and Meghan didn't consult Brenda and the royal family. Now, we don't know the details because they haven't published the details. But even if they hadn't consulted, what better choice could there be of that consultation about the naming? I mean, giving the girl the name of their great grandmother, and it's an affectionate version of the name. What difference would it make? What would have been the better result or outcome if they had consulted? We are not saying that we know that they didn't consult or did consult, but assuming that the Daily Mail and the Mail group are telling the facts that the pair didn't consult the royal family, what difference would a consultation have made in choosing a better name? So what is happening with the irresponsible and criminal negligence by Fleet Street, choosing to continue to have a go at Meghan and Harry? Is that they are proving that there is ongoing war against Meghan and Harry. Ongoing war against Meghan and Harry. And the Mail is, of course, the Daily Mail. there is a piece about the free speech, where it says speech. The free speech is, of course, when racists want to protect racist opinion. And there is a piece promoting the racist Andrew Neil. Where it says that Andrew Neil, is delighted that Harry is taking time off to look after his child. And he's saying, if it means he shuts up and gives us all a break, there is no break for Harry. There is no break for Meghan from these racist liars. And there is an attack on the investigation into racist cricket advisor. So they're saying that racist cricket advisor should be left alone and should be allowed to continue in his job without an investigation into his racist behavior. So what he's saying in the spin that Andrew Neil is doing for his new GB News starting today, he's saying that viewers will be the beneficiaries. Viewers will win. Now, Andrew Neil has been paid millions of pounds over the last few decades, that he has been in the opportunistic career of a right-wing, racist, corrupt media executive and media presenter. And there is nothing in his whole history where he has taken a single stance against racism, or that he has made a single wave that refers to the rights, the human rights of the people being victimized, either by institutional racism or individual racism in Britain, or in the West, or in the European Union. He is probably the most shameless kind of colleague or contemporary that resembles that, whose record looks like the record of the person he's a contemporary of. That is Boris Johnson. Of course, Boris Johnson as born in 1964, I think, is significantly younger than Andrew Neil, who must have been born in the 1940s. So about 2 decades difference. A contemporary in the sense of the various posts and positions that both have taken and shared. For example, Andrew Neil is and has been an executive at the far right weekly called The Spectator, which is a far right now. It wasn't far right before. It was right wing, but it has gone further. And he's also involved with transatlantic publications, media publications that are racist and right wing. And this particular venture, which is supposed to be broadcasting later tonight, GB News, has been funded at least to the tune of 100 millions, if not more. And so far, there is no published clue as to where the main money came from. It could have come from any number of right-wing sources. No left-wing source would, of course, fund anything that Andrew Neil owns or controls. But Andrew Neil, regardless of who the actual finance source or sources are or have been, is a permanent fixture of the far right, really, in media terms, in political commentary, etc. For example, when the anti-Meghan Markle Piers Morgan created his then latest stench against Meghan Markle, who had just been featured in vilification stories run by the Fleet Street media about the interview that Meghan Markle and Harry gave to the American broadcaster Oprah Winfrey. Piers Morgan didn't hesitate to condemn people who have had mental issues, including those who have been under pressure to commit suicide because they couldn't withstand the pressure of mental health issues. And Piers Morgan said that regardless of the topic, whatever she was saying, he, Morgan, would never trust a word that Meghan Markle said. I mean, why is he so certain that Meghan Markle, no matter what she says, what she talks about, is untrustworthy? I mean, where is the evidence? Number one. Number two is that he undermined and underestimated and insulted the many thousands of victims of mental health problems, people who felt suicidal, etc., who gave a so-called serving broadcaster or journalist, which is what Piers Morgan was when he attacked Meghan Markle about the mental health issues, and point blank said he did not believe a word she ever says. Now, when he was forced to resign because That was the topic that the complaint made on behalf of Meghan Markle against Piers Morgan on that same day when he said those things. And his statement and his attack or attacks on Meghan Markle were followed by his walking out. Because it wasn't about Meghan just as an individual, but it's about her opinion about the concerns, about the impact that people with mental health issues have endured and do suffer. That actually struck a chord with people that would not otherwise get involved in the exchange between Piers Morgan and the media, who gave platform to the interview. Now, why did the ITV executives feel that they had to give the ultimate kind of action, disciplinary action against Morgan, who has admitted that he was told to leave? So it wasn't like he was doing them a favor. They didn't need him because the liabilities, the reputational damage to the ITV caused by its association with Piers Morgan at that stage, the reputational damage had exceeded any benefits, business-wise, financially, that ITV as a broadcasting organization would get as a result of keeping Piers Morgan as a main presenter or any presenter. So he was forced to resign. And who comes up? Who out of the whole of the British media comes out to defend Piers Morgan? It's Andrew Neil. And Andrew Neil compares Piers Morgan with the kind of stature that Piers Morgan doesn't have, never had, never will have. Because the personality, dysfunction, and defects of Piers Morgan are such that he would never command due recognition and respect by doing due diligence and proper ethical and moral journalism. So what happens? Andrew Neil pops up with a glorified overstatement of the qualities and role and the capacity and the contribution of Piers Morgan to the British media, British mainstream. And he said that ITV would regret having lost Piers Morgan. Well, he didn't have to do that. But Brilopad, Andrew Neil, is probably the only other person other than Piers Morgan, apart from Jeremy Clarkson, with whom Piers Morgan has had a long-standing feud. But it seems that because of their similar attitude as racists, Piers Morgan and Jeremy Clarkson have not mentioned their feud in the last, let's say, 1 year, 2 years. So Andrew Neil, who has got the ego, the narcissism that is nearest to the ego and narcissism of Pierce Moron did make that splash because his co-racers in Fleet Street would give him and Pierce Moron the splash after Pierce Moron was forced to quit the ITV. But what happened after that is that Andrew Neil got much needed publicity for his channel. And there is no evidence that Andrew Neil really meant the spin that he made for Pierce Moron. Why? Because over the period, over the months that, or the weeks that have followed, Pierce Moron staged walking out of the ITV breakfast program. There has been hardly any further follow-up about what Pierce Moron would do with the GB, which is going to be controlled by Andrew Neil. And the reason is that Andrew Neil is not going to give his prime spot as the prime kind of star of the GB to a rival, Pierce Moron. Not only is there no clue as to what Pierce Moron will be given by Andrew Neil on the GB, and we can see that, updated, if you like, when they launch later today, that program. But subject to whatever the result is at the launch, the proof that Pierce Moron is a selfish, egotistic, offensive human being has been published by Fleet Street, and I'm still wondering why they published this set of autobiographical details by Celia Walden. Because Celia Walden is currently married to Pierce Moron. And her particular recollections about how Pierce Moron wooed her before she agreed to marry him gives away the game. It shows Pierce Moron as clinically sick. For example, she recalls that Pierce Moron, when she was not responding to his approaches, took increasingly desperate steps to get her to respond positively to him. And one of the things, or a number of things he did, was to send to Celia Walden toxic, literally poisonous substance. Now, that raises the question as to why Celia Walden then agreed to marry him, and why is she now talking about it? And one of the things that Celia Walden said, according to the reports in Fleet Street, is that he nearly, while driving her in a car that he was driving, Pierce Moron nearly got into a crash or crashed the car. According to Celia Walden, that was because Pierce Moron was spending most of the time looking at her legs. This is scary stuff. We shall be continuing in the next part.